And if this is your first time giving your mind a little love, I have a few goodies for you. First, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And second, sign up for the Morning Mind Love. Think of it like a weekday oracle from your highest self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, you'll get 2 gifts absolutely free: a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up. Welcome to Mind Love, episode 257. Today's episode is all about the science of thinking and reasoning better.
Smart people can rationalize better. They can come up with all sorts of alternative explanations. This is one study that I actually did not talk about in the book because I didn't cover the moral judgments, but there's a study showing that creative people actually cheat more because they can come up with all sorts of explanations to rationalize their cheating behavior. So a student might cheat in an exam and they might say, oh, the exam was not fair, or the professor didn't really teach well. So this is not really a cheating. So they can come up with all these explanations. So they could be committing more fallacies as a result.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
If this is your first time giving your mind a little love, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Mind love is a habit, and the more you give your mind that love and intention, the better you'll feel about yourself and your life. Plus, it's really a win-win because more subscribers means Mind Love attracts even more amazing guests to bring you their wisdom. So don't forget to subscribe. I think most of us can agree that we have a thinking problem in our country. Well, probably in the entire world, meaning that most people just don't know how. They don't think critically. They don't know how to discern what's true and what's not. They're biased and overconfident. They're blind to what's obvious. And those are just the people who think differently than I do. Just kidding, but also kind of serious, because isn't that how we all think? When we have a strong opinion, we often look down on the people who don't reach the same conclusions as we do, whether they have the same facts as we do or not. My small self, or my ego, feels it hard. It's frustrating. But for me, it only takes being wrong a few times to have at least a little more awareness around it. A recent example was veganism. I was vegan for 5 years and completely convinced that it was the best, most sustainable, healthiest, and harm-free way to eat. I honestly believed that everyone should be vegan and that they were killing themselves one piece of bacon at a time. I'd read books like How Not to Die and the China Study and Plant Strong. All of them were full of study after study about the negative effects of all meat and the healing effects of a plant-based diet. And I was so convinced that I didn't let myself see that I hadn't been feeling great in 2 or 3 years. And this episode is not about veganism, and I don't want to piss off all of the vegans because I know your hearts, and I know why I went vegan, and I know how I felt about things like this when I was vegan, but I think it's worth sharing because we often think that we know what's right for the rest of the world, when we rarely fully understand what's right for ourselves. Well, I finally cracked open my blind beliefs when I felt like I was dying earlier in this pregnancy. And it was my second one that was this troublesome. I couldn't get out of bed. I had pounding headaches. I couldn't play with my son or even just think thoughts. And when I first went vegan, my digestion healed in a way that felt miraculous. But the last few years, all of the problems were back and I could not figure out why. But I knew for sure that it was not my diet because my diet is what healed it in the first place. Well, just a few days into eating differently, I already felt worlds better. The pregnancy has still been difficult. I think I still have a lot of healing to do. But I was so shocked and just mind blown that all of these foods that I had demonized could be what's helping me. So I had to go back to all my research. And in my deep dive, I found that a lot of talking points that I had been touting for years as facts were actually cherry-picked, biased and only a piece of the picture. Not to mention, there was never any discernment between quality of meat and dairy, like grass-fed organic or pasture-raised organic, when comparing to a plant-based diet. And again, this episode is not about veganism, but I just want to show how different things can make sense, or we fail to see sides that might negate our beliefs based on the lives that we've lived or our circumstances at the time. And yes, there is a convincing counter-argument to every argument I've ever had. And for you vegans, know that I love you. Like I said, I see your heart. And if you're anything like I was, this little monologue might have you bristling a bit. But I had to listen to my body, and my body was screaming. And in order to cope with this change, I also had to go down the rabbit hole of the actual harm that all diets cause. There is no harm-free diet. That topic is for a whole other episode, but I do know that I was blind to a lot of the things that I see now, and I hope you still love me. Well, I did something similar in early 2020. I was so triggered by the other side of my arguments that I decided to spend time with people who disagreed with me. I found that most of what I thought about them were just wrong. The motives I had been told, thinking about it now, by the media were not the actual motives that they spoke of when I talked to them. And we actually had way more in common than I would have expected. For the most part, we wanted the same things, but we just had really different ideas of how to get there. But we would never have known that we wanted the same things because big media likes to spin things for emotion, and it works. The funny thing about thinking is, we all think that we're doing it right. We all think the facts we found are the correct ones. Even in just reading the title of this episode, I bet some of you weren't thinking much about how you want to listen and make sure this episode helps you come to the right conclusions. But maybe your first thought was, oh man, I have to listen to this episode so I can send it to all of the people who I think stupidly. Well, that in itself is one of the thinking traps that we're going to discuss today, the fluency effect and how it leads to our own overconfidence. Well, the biggest problem I see with us being stuck in our beliefs and becoming more and more intolerant to those who think differently, obviously, division, but more specifically, we are losing sight of how beautiful a spectrum is. And for me, learning what traps I might fall in when I'm trying to find the truth gives me compassion for other people. People stop seeming stupid, and they just seem a little biased. We can see how our unique experiences lead to blind spots. And when we start to see those blind spots in ourselves, we might stop being so eager to point the finger. So today we're learning how to think better so we can reason better and ultimately live better. And our guest is Woo-Kyoung An. She's the John Hay Whitney Professor of Psychology at Yale University, and her research on thinking biases has been funded by the National Institutes of Health, and she's a fellow of the American Psychological Association and Association of Psychological Science. So 3 key things we will learn are why we fail to see things as they are, why others don't always get what's obvious to us, and the 8 most common biases and fallacies that keep our minds closed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. I need the right person with the right background who can actually move things forward, which is why I trust Indeed-sponsored jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post even seen on other sites. Sponsored jobs boost your post for quality candidates so you can reach the exact people you want faster, and it makes a big difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs because you reach a bigger pool of quality candidates. If I needed to hire someone for the podcast, I wouldn't want people who just think editing sounds fun. I'd want someone who's edited conversational podcasts for years, gets my style, knows the software. And with Indeed-sponsored jobs, I'd get actual podcast editors who know what they're doing. Plus, you only pay for results. No monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts. And in the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results now with Indeed-sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/mindlove. Just go to Indeed.com/mindlove right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/mindlove. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. And now let's welcome Woo-Kyoung on to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
So what's your backstory and why do you believe that cognitive psychology can make the world a better place?
So when I started my graduate school at University of Illinois, I did the standard basic research in cognitive psychology. And especially I was studying how people represent concepts, what models best fit. And then I worked on that for several years. And it got to the point where I felt like, sorry for my language, and I know it's the beginning, but it felt like a little bit like a mental masturbation to me. So at that point, I just said, look, I can't do this anymore. I want to really want to do the studies that would actually make a difference in somebody's lives. It's not like I don't want to just put something out and just believe that someday somebody might use this for something good. So I said, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. So I just decided to study more real life related issues in cognitive psychology, but it's still cognitive psychology. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going through your book and I'm like, yeah, all of these things hit me. I struggle with all of them. I don't know if learning about them will ever make me completely immune to them. Have you found that knowing more, knowing what thinking traps you could possibly fall into, does that help you avoid them more? And when do you find yourself still falling into the traps?
I'm still not immune to all of these, of course not. And I confess many of my current errors in the book myself too. And the one that just occurs to my mind right now is a planning fallacy. So it's the fallacy of underestimating how long you think a task is going to take. And I knew that, and I knew it happens because when you're planning on something, you just set out, I'm going to do A, B, and C. And then when you set that out, it feels like it runs so smoothly in your head, right? It's like watching BTS dancing, and they do it so effortlessly. You think you can learn it. Just like that, we think of our plans that way. And when it runs like that, you end up forgetting all of the possible obstacles that are related to the task, as well as obstacles that are not related to your tasks. So once I learned that, my biggest planning fallacy example is I was working on a lecture on planning fallacy, and I thought I could finish in 3 days. It took me 2 weeks. So I usually just do not try to argue with myself. I just say, look, I'm going to just double the estimate and then just go with it. That actually helps. That one, I think I'm much better. I'm getting much better at it, because if I have extra time left because I overestimated, that's even better. I can do something else. So that's one thing that I can still do it. But there are still many examples that I still fall into it. But at least I can recognize it and just laugh at myself and share and write it down for my next lecture.
The planning fallacy gets me with everything. It could be just cleaning my kitchen. And I'm like,
Yes.
why? And so is it best to just kind of arbitrarily double it? Because some people might say, well, then you should account for everything that could go wrong. But that just seems like such a waste of time.
Well, that is hard because you don't know what's going to happen by definition. So the tip is think about the similar tasks that you did in the past. But then people can always say that, it's going to be different this time. I learned my lesson this time. So it's better not to think about it and just double it. Yeah.
It kind of goes back to another one of the fallacies that you mentioned about why we're so overconfident, the fluency effect. And so we seem like, we're planning something and it's like, well, everything's going to go right. Or maybe we're overconfident in our ability to do the dance that you just talked about. Or maybe we're overconfident in I know you used an example that when people were polled, a large percentage of people thought that they were better drivers, that they were like one of the top 10% of drivers or something like that. But 93% of people think that. So it's like, where does this fluency effect hit us the most? And what exactly is it? Where does this fluency effect hit us the most? And what exactly is it?
Fluency effect is more like it's what we call metacognition. So when you are trying to estimate whether you can do something, like let's say you go to Japan and there's a great bike tour. And before you put the deposit down, you need to figure out, oh, can I really bike in this busy streets in the middle of Tokyo? And when you do that, you probably kind of run in your head how easy it feels. So if you feel kind of, oh yeah, I think I can do it. I can stop. I can turn. I've done that many times, although that was 10 years ago. But I still remember how I can do it. So it's that kind of knowledge that lets you decide whether you can jump into something, whether you can try something. It's a very important skill. And most of the time, fluency actually helps you. It guides you. It gives you the accurate information. So, for example, you can cook ramen noodles. So yes, that's a correct information because you can run it in your head easily. But in many other situations, like planning for the future, it could be you can't really anticipate all the bad things that can happen. So that's when you fall apart. And same with watching BTS dancing or somebody cooking very fancy dish on YouTube. They are heavily edited, of course, and they practice so many times. And books that are so easy to read, they probably went through about 50 revisions. But you forget all these revision processes and you only look at the final product and it creates an illusion that it was probably easy book to write also. And that souffle dish is also easy to make. And you totally forget how much editing it must have gone in behind. Yeah.
It reminds me of when lockdowns first happened and everyone was all of a sudden taking to TikTok to learn dances. And so I was like, well, I ran out of puzzles. Let's try a dance. And I was like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never been great at, I've never really delved into choreographed dancing. So that makes sense. But it also reminds me of one of my favorite things that exists is there's Instagram accounts and Pinterest boards of what's called Pinterest fails. And it's always what the Pinterest pin that they saw that they tried to make, usually in baking, and how it actually turned out. And it's this gorgeous thing. And then this horrible photo where everything's melting off. And it's just so funny because it's not even just the skill that it took to bake that cake or to make that perfect. You got to bake the cake, do the icing, whatever it is. But then even the photography skills, you can't even replicate. So it's just a fail all around. But that's how it affects our skills. How does this come into play when it comes to overconfidence with our own knowledge?
So we also overestimate how much we know. So, for example, if I ask, this is actually done in a study, not by myself, but someone else, do you know how a toilet works? Then most people say, yeah, I've lifted that toilet tank lid. I've seen inside. I know it, you just need to flush and it goes down and so on. So they say, okay, I kind of know it. But then when they're asked to actually write down now, explain how it actually works. And you have no idea where to even begin. And then so you get humbled and you realize you didn't really quite understand how a toilet works. And these things can have a real life consequences for students who think that, okay, I understood the lectures. I didn't really have to take notes because it was so easy to understand. So I'm pretty sure I can just generate that during the exam. And then I hear so many students saying that I thought I understood. I don't know what happened. I just could not explain it. So, and it can also happen in a job interview situation. You feel like you know what to say, A, B, and C, but then you realize once they ask you, start asking you and going deeper and deeper, you realize that you didn't really think through how you're going to contribute to that company. So the prescription that I give to that is, just try it out. Just say it with a actual voice and see whether you can articulate something to a person who has no idea what you're thinking. So with the exam, I tell my students, try to explain those experiments to your roommate who are not taking this course. And actually do it. And you're going to soon realize you didn't quite really understood the implication of those experiments.
Yes, I, first of all, believe that this is why whenever I learn something from somebody else, my first instinct is always to verify it, because I feel like so often, we read something or we think we understand it. And then when we go to relay it to someone else, we have no idea what we're talking about. We don't realize how much we missed. And then people don't like to look like they don't know things. And so they'll just sort of fill in the holes.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, that's why there's like memes that go around where people joke about how like, what did people do before the internet? And it's like, well, Aunt Martha told us where flour comes from, was completely wrong. We believed him, and we held that with us for 35 years until we randomly thought to Google it. And so One of the things that I do, that's why I love having a podcast, is because I get to kind of regurgitate information, and I'll practice sometimes. I should do it more often when I'm learning something new. I'll kind of share about it on my story, so I know what stuck and what didn't on Instagram. And so that's a great one. But I feel like the one that gets me the most often, and probably most people, is confirmation bias. And this is probably the one fallacy that everyone's heard of before, but it's worth going over, because even though everyone's heard of it, we all fall prey to it. And so it's basically, how can we go wrong when we're trying to be right? So what is it, and how does it come up in our lives?
So to put it simply, as the name says, it's a tendency to try to confirm what you believe. And most people think that, oh yeah, probably I don't do it because I'm not that self-righteous. I'm not that confident person, and also I'm not political. I don't have any strong opinion about anything. And also people also think that, oh yeah, if there's an evidence that this confirms what you believed, yeah, how can I deny that? I will just, change my mind, all right? So we tend to think that confirmation bias happens only to these people who have ulterior motives or who are just narcissistic or something like that. But it can happen to anybody. So here's my pandemic example. So at the beginning of the pandemic, since I was working at home, right next to the refrigerator and wearing sweatpants, I knew I was going to gain weight. So I said, I'm going to be on a treadmill almost every day, 30 minutes a day. And a year later, I still gained 5 pounds. And I realized based on that, I just have data confirming that exercise actually increased my weight. So, right? So how can I deny that evidence? And then I realized, oh, this is a confirmation bias, because I don't have a data on what would have happened if I didn't do the treadmill during the last year. I might have gained 15 pounds and not just 5 pounds. So it's possible that exercise actually helped me reduce the weight, control the weight, but I have no idea whether, because I don't have the other side of it. I don't have what experimental psychologists say, I don't have a control condition where I don't do the exercise and see what happens during that time.
I can think of 19 examples, but they're all political, and I don't want to trigger people right now.
It's fine. It's fine. Well, okay. It's your audience, so.
Well, it's one of those things where, and the one that gets me is just, I have family members who are like, well, if I didn't get this particular thing, I would have gotten the virus worse. And I'm like, but you don't know that. You actually can never know that within your own body. It's possible. You can look at statistics from other people, but you can't say that for 100% a shadow of a doubt. And so I just don't like that argument.
Exactly. And it's really difficult. So I have a story about the bloodletting. It's medical malpractice that persisted in the Western society for 2,000 years up until around George Washington. He presumably died of bloodletting. So when he had a throat infection, they let his bad, quote unquote, bad blood out too much. So he died of bloodletting, presumably. And how could that have lasted that long? And especially people wanted to cure sick people. It's not like they had any kind of political agenda behind bloodletting. And what happened is whenever they started believing that bloodletting works, and so whenever someone gets sick, you let the blood out and people get better. And you keep on seeing that pattern. Most of the time, the bloodletting seems to cure people. And you didn't have any information about what would have happened if you didn't do the bloodletting on a sick people. And because we have an immune system, we can spontaneously recover. Most people would have recovered from a bad cold or flu all by themselves, not because of a bloodletting. So if bloodletting didn't do anything, if they only had that kind of data, they would have realized that this does not work. And they could have disconfirmed it, but they just didn't bother to collect that data for 2,000 years.
I'm such a big proponent of we need to have a control group and a real control group. And there's so many different conflicts of interest with all of our industries that we rarely have that. And I think it's by design sometimes so that it doesn't come out that, no, you shouldn't make billions of dollars off of this. But that one example you gave me reminded me of an example you gave in the fallacy of biased interpretation, why we fail to see things as they are. And the example in the book you talked about was myopia with babies. Can you go into that?
Oh, gosh. So, yes. So I think it was kind of similar to your children. So my first child and the second child, they're 3 years apart. And the first one was born in 1999. And I read a Nature article that children, if parents use a night light in the baby's rooms, then they're more likely to develop myopia when they grow up. And it got a lot of media attention. It was on CNN. It was all over the place, BBC. And it was a Nature paper. It must have been reviewed rigorously. But so, of course, I got rid of I did not buy the nightlights for my first child. And then my second child was born 3 years later. And at that time, another paper came out in Nature, and they found out that that initial study was confounded in that they forgot to control for the parents' vision. So parents who have poor eyesight are more likely to use the night lights because they can't really see in the dark. And because parents have the poor vision, it's the genes. So the children are more likely to develop the myopia. And so I read that paper, and CNN even put out the retraction article too. But then, can I really not use night lights with my, can I actually use night lights with my second child? Can I risk that? And I said, no, who knows? So I still did not use the night lights. But of course, they both wear glasses because both me and my husband have a poor vision. Yeah.
That reminds me of when I was pregnant for the first time, I was reading all these books, and there was this really great book called Expecting Better. And it's written by an economist. And so she's used to kind of discerning through papers that are less like, oh, this was done in a lab, very controlled. They're doing the more societal studies where they've got to account for all of these possibilities. And so she went down and broke down all of these different myths with pregnancies. And the one that stood out to me was one with coffee. And so you still, to this day, many women believe you should not have coffee at all when you're pregnant. And many women now are kind of pushing back on that, because what she broke down in this book was that, and she really took every single study that existed, she ended up finding out that there was an increased miscarriage rate with women who drank coffee. But where the correlation actually is that women with nausea don't tend to drink coffee. And having nausea is a positive sign when you're pregnant. Like when you have no nausea, not saying that nothing could go wrong, but there's a higher rate of miscarriage with women who have no symptoms. And so they were drinking coffee more often. And so it wasn't the coffee correlation, it was actually the nausea correlation. And I had never really studied things in that way. And so it just changed the way that I view any sort of correlation with anything. It's like, yeah, but what else is at play here? Yes, like drinking could increase the risk of this, but how many of those people are also doing heroin or whatever it is? And so you really have to know where the study is coming from if you're going to like change your whole life around it. But then you're right. It's like, do you want to risk it anyways?
Yes, exactly. Same with echinacea. I swear by echinacea whenever I have a sore throat. And of course, sore throat goes away. And I know there's a controversy about whether it really works, but I don't want to take a risk.
I'm with you. I will take echinacea. Yeah. I'll take elderberry. I'm all about all the holistic things. And it does take a little longer. So it's harder. Whereas you can take prescription medication and often feel different that day. And it's like, well, I'm taking the holistic route. It might take me a day, but it's like, would it have gone away?
So, I mean, the problem with echinacea is not that, even if we commit confirmation bias with echinacea, it's not a big deal. I mean, I might be wasting $10 each year for that, but it's not a huge deal. But there are some real negative consequences of a confirmation bias, such as in the science field, traditionally, men were most of the scientists were men. And based on that observations, they must have developed the idea that men are good at science and maybe men are better in science than women are. So, but then they didn't even bother to hire women because of that belief, right? There was no control condition once again. And only if they had hired the woman for the science positions, only if they were given the opportunity to do it, they could have collected the disconfirming evidence right there. Yeah.
That's a good example. And it's difficult because so often we'll hear one narrative kind of being screamed from a group of people, and we'll look at that group and it's like, yeah, okay, well, they're all really highly educated. They're all very intelligent. That's how I used to do it when I was in my teens. I was like, well, it seems like all the smart people are saying this. Why? And one of the things that you bring up is that smart people can actually be more biased. And that's something that I've discerned in my older age as well. Why is that?
Well, it's because when we were trying to stick with your belief, then smart people can rationalize better. They can come up with all sorts of alternative explanations. This is one study that I actually did not talk about in the book because I didn't cover the moral judgments, but there's a study showing that creative people actually cheat more because they can come up with all sorts of explanations to rationalize their cheating behavior. So a student might cheat in an exam and they might say, oh, the exam was not fair, or the professor didn't really teach well. So this is not really cheating. So they can come up with all these explanations. So they could be committing more fallacies as a result.
Are you reading my high school diary?
Oh my God.
Because also I was very creative on how I cheated. I got really good at writing things very small on note cards and putting it in the bottom of my pant leg and then just like sliding it out with my one leg up. But I know that one of the other ways that these biases really hit us is when we're relying on anecdotes. And it's so difficult. I know that this is something that definitely affects me. There's different things that have happened within my family or my friendship circle over very highly controversial topics in the last couple of years. And I'm like, well, I see it firsthand. This happened right in front of me. And it's anecdotal. And so what is the problem with relying on anecdotes? Because so many people might just be like, well, if I've experienced this firsthand, then of course it's something that I'm going to watch out for, whatever it's guiding you toward.
Right. So anecdote, first of all, the sample size is so small. And we all know that the more the data, the better, the more accurate predictions you can make about the future. So when the anecdote is so salient in your mind, then you can ignore the large statistics, a large database. And also you can ignore lots of other statistical principles. So one of them that I talk about in the book is, might be a little bit emotionally charged example, but when 9/11 happened, the terrorists were all Muslims, and we saw their pictures, their faces on the newspaper. And we saw the picture of Osama bin Laden all the time. I don't know whether you're the 9/11 generation. But
oh, yeah. I remember exactly where I was. I was a junior in high school.
Oh, I see. So, and based on that information alone, people now started believing that if someone is a Muslim, then someone must be a terrorist as well. And that's totally probabilistically wrong inference. So it's like this. If someone is pregnant, we know that the person is a woman, and with 100%, certainty. But if someone is a woman, then the likelihood that the person is pregnant is essentially zero. I mean, it's not zero, but it's very, very low. So same with it. Even if the terrorists that we observed so far are like 1/3 of them, even if 1/3 of them were Muslims, that does not mean that 1/3 of the Muslims in this country are terrorists. That's totally the opposite probability. But then we saw this salient, image. We had salient images of 9/11, the buildings burning, people falling down, and then overlapped with the Muslim faces, and we just cannot shake that image, and we just overgeneralize it, and that's where the ethnic profiling happened, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example of just especially how people can be harmed, how we can be divided.
Yeah.
It's difficult though, because say tomorrow some new drug comes out that's like, this is just the peace drug. It gives everyone peace. And then your mom takes it and she dies immediately. Like, there's no way I'm going to take that. But then if the statistical evidence shows, 1 in a million die, I still am not going to take it because I just watched my mom die. You know what I mean? And so it's like, how can we actually make the best use of specific examples so that we're not hurting people, but we are taking heed when maybe the universe shows us something?
So there are two points that I want to make. One is there's a study that shows that people are more likely to donate money to some charity or organization if they read about a specific story about a specific child or something. And they're more likely to donate money than if they had heard about statistics about how many people are dying of hunger and so on. So the best thing we can do, which is what many charity organizations actually use, is combine the two. So present the statistics and also present a picture of a specific person and the story behind that person. That way you can make use of both of them. And the other issue is that even though examples are very powerful in our mind, we tend to get stuck with the surface features, storylines only, rather than the real lesson behind examples. And that had been shown in numerous examples. A student, smart students, they read about some important principle that's embedded in some war story. And 3 minutes later, they were asked to solve a new problem, and they could have just drawn that principle from the story that they just read, but they just forget about it. They don't know how to transfer it to a new situation. And what worked, the reason why it happens is that because these examples are just so powerful in our mind, we forget the abstract principle behind it. So to get over that, the solution they found was present multiple examples in many different storylines. So in my book, whenever I talk about some phenomena, I just try to give as many examples as possible. The editor said, why are we going over another example here? You will get to that. There's a chapter on that issue. So
You're like, when you finish my book, you'll know why.
yes.
So another thing that hits us is giving credit or assigning blame to things that might not actually be the cause of something, causal attribution.
Yeah.
So how does this tend to affect us the most?
So here's the thing. We can never figure out what caused what. There's no way. We don't have a time machine. And even if we're watching what's happening right in front of our eyes, there's always some possible alternative explanations. So we can never figure that out. So what we could do is to just use some indirect cues to infer the causality. So one of the cues that we would be what they call recency effect. Okay, let's talk about the recency effect because that's my favorite experiment. So when you watch, I don't know what kind of sports game you watch, but let's say football or baseball. No,
none of them. So we're just going to pick one.
Okay, baseball. And let's say it was a very tight game, and then someone shot it, and he made it, and then won. And of course, he's going to get all of the credit from that game. But then when you think about it, there's so many other things that happened up to that point. It's not just that winning shot that made all the difference. Everybody else, who participated in that game should get the credit. But we tend to give them more credit on the recent events rather than the ones that happened further away. So as a result, we could give undue credit, too much credit for the people who just happened to be there at the last minute. Or we could also blame the person who just happened to be there at the last minute in the sequence of the events.
That's so sad when you consider a sports team. It always seems like there's one guy that's getting all the credit. My husband decided to play a fantasy league.
Yeah.
And so I'm hearing about sports more than I'm comfortable with. It's just funny kind of hearing all the stories. And there's this one guy who was supposed to be so good, then he just failed. And it's like, well, why did everyone think he's so good? Oh, because it was just the very last thing that they saw. And it was the one good thing he did the whole game.
Yeah.
That reminds me too of, you gave an example of Sports Illustrated in your book about how every time most times that people are featured in Sports Illustrated, for some reason, right afterwards, they end up on a losing streak. They kind of kill their glory. Why does that happen?
Because to make it to the Sports Illustrated cover, you gotta be at the very top of all this amazing, among all these amazing athletes. And to be at that level of the rank, everything must have really worked for that person. Even with I'm not saying that these things are all determined randomly, but even with sports, there are a lot of random events happening. So, for example, the coffee that you had in the morning might have been a decaf accidentally rather than a caffeinated coffee, or the referee that day might have been cranky, or maybe hotel room next door. They were having a party, so you couldn't sleep well, or the ground was not, really your type of ground or something. There's so many bad things that can happen. And if you really won all the way, that means that most of the time you had all these good lucks working for you. But then it's unlikely that it will keep on happening. There will be some bad lucks happening. So that phenomenon is called regression to the mean. So the scores or performance that are really, really high or really, really low, they tend to go back to the mean because it's unlikely that the same, streak of bad lucks or same streak of good lucks will happen again. So statistically, it could be they're going to just go to the middle. But then people make false attributions, and they think that, oh, they became arrogant. That's why they're not playing well after they made the cover. Or they became lazy, or maybe they became too nervous. No, there might not be any true causal explanations behind any of these changes. It could be just pure statistical errors.
So basically, if you know you're at the top of your game, you also know that the only place left to go is down. So basically, if you know you're at the top of your game, you also know that the only place left to go is down. But one great thing about athletes is it's something I remember reading in one of my favorite books, Psycho-Cybernetics, and it talks about how like the best athletes or the most successful people are so good at forgetting what happened immediately. And so that way they have a fumble or whatever the football terms are. Or like something goes wrong and they're just like on to the next thing. Whereas most humans kind of mull in that and they let it affect us. And that's brings me to my next one, the negativity bias, and basically our fear of loss leading us astray. How does that tend to affect us the most?
Let's see, which one do I want to talk about? So, loss aversion. Oh, let me look at my notes. This is again illusion of fluency. Since I wrote the whole book, people think that I remember everything that I wrote in the book.
No, I get it.
But I still need examples too. So I do a lot of shopping online, and also I study a lot of reviews before I purchase anything. And these negative reviews are just such a strong, powerful thing, right?
I love reading them. I don't know why. I will get sucked down the 1-star reviews. I just find joy in it. Continue.
Yes. No, not that one. Not that way, but more like even if you want to buy something, right? You can't really shake it, off, right? Even though 4 other people said, it's going to last forever, it's going to wash well, and so on. But one bad review is shrank in my dryer. That's a killer for you. And that's because we tend to be more sensitive to negative information. And same with loss. We are more sensitive to the loss rather than the gains. So even if it's like gaining, let's say you found $20 bill on the street, then you'll be happy. Let's say you're happy on a 10-point scale, you're happy like 5 point or something. And then the next day you lose $20. It was in your wallet, but it was gone somehow. You must have left it somewhere, and you're gonna feel bad. But is that impact of losing that $20 still 5 units? It's going to hurt more than when the impact of losing is much greater in intensity than the joy of gaining exactly the same amount of money. And that is called loss aversion.
That reminds me of basically compliments and insults. It's something I learned when I was young. It's probably one of the first psychological concepts I remember learning is that, 100 people can tell you you're beautiful, but that one kid who randomly says you're ugly in middle school, and I'm still working through it today, and I'm 37 years old.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's what happens. And that's very easy to cause depression as a result, right? Yeah.
And so when we realize that, or one of the other ways that this negativity bias also can hit us is something that I took like a special note for because I'm selling some things online right now. You talk about the endowment effect and how buyers and sellers rarely agree on the price of an item. Yes. What's happening there?
Yeah. I mean, of course, they rarely agree on the price because sellers want to make as much money as possible and the buyers do not want to spend that much money. But then at the same time, just because a seller has that thing, they might think that it's more expensive, more valuable than the buyer who does not own it. So this was demonstrated in a classic experiment with coffee mug, and a chocolate bar. So half the participants were told, look, this is a gift for you. You can have this mug. Do you want to trade this with a Swiss chocolate bar? And they said about 80% of them said, no, I don't want to trade it. And then similar group of participants, same school, same undergraduate students, this time they were given the chocolate bar first. This is yours. You can keep it. Would you like to trade this with the coffee mug? And then 80% of them say, no, I don't want to trade it. So whatever they owned it first, they think it's more valuable. They don't want to let it go because it's loss. Loss hurts more than gains. Yeah.
Plus, I've now endowed it with my energy. Of course, it's more valuable. You're getting not a chocolate bar. You're getting a chocolate bar from Melissa.
Yes.
So one of the other ones that I feel like is really poignant these days is why other people don't always get what's obvious to us, the dangers of perspective taking.
Yeah.
How is that hindering our openness here?
Right. So let's say you and your husband goes to hotel and you're the one who made a reservation for the hotel. And your husband, I don't know your relationship at all, but your husband just says, oh, how did you find this hotel? There are multiple possible interpretations of that question, right? One is, this is an amazing hotel. How did you find such an amazing hotel? Or this is such a bad hotel. What were you thinking when you made this reservation? Or maybe your husband really does not know how to find a hotel at all. So he was just asking you, how do I just want to learn how to do it? There are many different interpretations on this. And when your husband asks that question, he probably has some kind of intended meaning behind. And it's so salient in his head that he does not understand that you are clueless about what he meant to say out of this. And at the same time, you also already made one interpretation out of all possible interpretations. And you are also very, very overconfident that, oh, yeah, I know what he meant to say. He was complaining, of course.
Yeah, I'm already mad at him, and he's not even here.
And studies have shown that, especially among the people who know each other, this kind of overconfidence both ways, it happens all the time. And it happens when you're making also sarcastic jokes over text. You think it's obvious to the reader, right? When you say, oh, she has done it again, or I had the best work day of my life today. You meant it to be sarcasm. But the readers have no idea. It was when they did that in an experiment, they were at the chance level of guessing.
I'm just reminded with this one of my last pregnancy. I don't know what it is about this one. Maybe it's because I'm eating differently. I've done a lot of work in the last 2 years. I am so much less emotional than last time, but the amount of miscommunications because I thought he was saying something the last pregnancy. I'm like, what? What did you mean by that? And he's like trying to explain. And I'm like, nope, I'm sticking with the first meaning because this is the one that feels good.
Yeah, there's one solution to that. Just ask, what did you mean? Just admit that you didn't get the meaning. Just ask. Yeah.
It's so easy, but my ego gets stroked with this one. Okay, so the last one I want to touch on is the trouble with delayed gratification. And this is something that's important to me right now because for some reason, I'm pretty sure that one of the things that's causing my pregnancy acid reflux is the mini wheats I refuse to stop eating. They're these Kashi organic mini wheats filled with berries that I never eat, not when I'm not pregnant, but for some reason I want a bowl every single day. And like before this interview, I'm like, no, I shouldn't eat it because I think it might cause acid reflux, but I couldn't help myself because I can't prove it yet if I don't give myself an accurate case study. So I just keep doing it. I don't know if that's a good example of the delayed gratification, but
so yeah, the delayed gratification is in your case would be not having acid reflux. That would be the reward, right?
Yes.
But that's going to happen in the future. And you can't wait for that reward. So right now, you just eat what you feel like eating.
Yes.
So there are many reasons why that happens. One could be, I mean, of course, when you're pregnant, how can you do those, impulse control, right? There's so many things that you have to, you're waiting for your baby. You have to put up with so many things waiting for that baby reward, a healthy baby. So you are kind of drained already. So
Thank you. Right? These are all the justifications I need to go pour another bowl.
So there's definitely this impulse control, self-control issues too. And there are ways to control it and techniques. One of them is just distract yourself. Do something else so that your mind is off from it. So, I mean, I don't know whether you've heard about the marshmallow test, right? So
yeah. I 100% know that I would have been the first child to fail that marshmallow test. Like, there's a delicious marshmallow sitting there. There's no way.
Yes. But then when they were distracted, when they're told to think about some other toys or play with some other toys, then they could wait for 15 minutes for the second marshmallow without eating the marshmallow that's right in front of them. So distraction works. But then I kind of want to talk about another issues that's more related to mental health, which is that if you try to control yourself too much, it can backfire too. So I do believe in grit. I think perseverance is a great thing. We should really persist and we should go for it. But sometimes people could be doing too much. So there's a study, it was done in Georgia, rural Georgia, with participants were all Black Americans participants. And they were in a very low socioeconomic status too. And they measure their self-control, levels of self-control when they were in high school. And they followed these kids for several years. And those who had a very high levels of self-control, they're less likely to get into drug addiction or crimes or things like that. So that's all good news. But then their physical health was worse than the people who had less self-control. And it's because when you're in a harsh environment, there's so many things that are, bombarded on you, disaster after disaster. And when you have very high levels of self-control, you want to manage all of these issues. And as a result, your physical health become compromised as a result. So that's why I'm saying that when you're pregnant, you could just cut some slack on yourself as well.
I am. That's why I bought the mini wheats in the first place. I'm one of those people who I'm like, I just don't buy things if I know it's going to be a temptation, usually. And then I give myself the grace if it happens to be on a bowl and a table at a social event, So that's kind of how I use the self-discipline, but I'm not too strict. But no, when I'm pregnant, that all goes out the window. There's plenty of desserts in my pantry right now. I try to make them with better ingredients, but it is what it is. Well, this has been such an enlightening episode. We covered so many things, and I feel like it was so much fun in the way that we did it. So for listeners that are interested in diving deeper into this and reading your book, which, by the way, is one of those books that just sucks you in. You think it's going to be like a dense read, but it's just fun to read, all these studies. So for listeners that are interested in that, where's the best place for them to connect?
They can always go to the Yale psychology department, and we post our emails there. And then there's a link to my book also. You can always find my name and email addresses. So you can always email me. Yeah.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/257. Your challenge for this week is to spend some time thinking about your biases. For me, I know the first place to start are the ideas that I am 100% convinced that I am right. And there's kind of a lot of those, I'll be honest. I'm human. and I spend a lot of time researching. And my whole goal is to find the truth. And there's a downside to that because now I have a whole lot of opinions that I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure I know the truth on this. But what I'm learning and the way that I'm humbling myself is that I'm trying to actually integrate practices that sort of knock me off my pedestal. Not that I really consider myself to be on a pedestal, but you know what I mean. At the very least, my goal is to get my mind into a place where I can say, this is what I am 100% convinced is right for me. And that for me is a huge part of it. I shared a little bit about my vegan journey, and I'm going to be honest with you. I've gone down this rabbit hole deep enough that I now am, well, there's a very large part of me that's convinced that it's not healthy for anyone to eat the way I used to. However, I do know people that have been eating that way for decades. I know more people that stopped, but even now, you can hear me adding to my own biases of saying, still, the evidence points in one direction. But here's the thing. There are a subset of people, even if I think it's smaller, that feel good, that like what they're doing, and who am I to say that I know what's right for them? And it sounds like a big thing when we're talking about the way somebody eats, but it's with everything. Think about your strong feelings about decisions made in the last 2 years, or that not getting something or getting something, medical procedures, ways that they think, what they wear, how they present themselves. We have opinions about so many things, and they're only getting more intense because everything's being stoked by the media. That is just a fact. That's how media works, especially now. Whereas before, they just sell newspapers and distribute them or have a few channels on TV. Now there are so many other options to consume information, like different news outlets, streaming, still cable-based television, Instagram, Facebook, all of these things. So they're all competing with each other. And the only way to compete is to get things that actually get you to click. If you've ever seen The Social Dilemma, it explains this in detail, although even that movie was biased. Anyways, I'm not telling you how to think. I am just telling you to check your thoughts and possibly work a little bit on the humility of understanding that not one of us knows what is right for everyone. And one of the best things that we can do is to discern our thoughts. And I think that's not necessarily always figuring out what's right and wrong, but checking ourselves and saying, I will never know what's exactly right and what's exactly wrong. I will do my best to figure out what is right for me based on what we learn from books and podcasts and fallacies and biases. But there is always room for error. And to hold that knowledge as sacred is true wisdom. So let me know what you got from this episode. Let me know if you've had any thoughts that you've checked, things that you've realized maybe you were a little bit too convicted on, and reach out to me at MindLoveMelissa. If you love this episode, consider taking a screenshot and sharing it on Instagram and tagging MindLoveMelissa and MindLovePodcast. Also, if you feel like leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, I will absolutely love you and name my 4th child after you, because I am not having a 4th child, but that's how much it means to me. And if you do, I just might read your review on the show. If you'd like to support in other ways, you can find all of my sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And the best way to support is by joining MindLove Premium at mindlove.com/premium. You get a whole backlog of exclusive episodes that are only available for premium members. You also get early release, ad-free, and I'm thinking about adding something else, so I want to know what you think. I have a whole lot of unaired interviews. Don't ask why. And I'm thinking about posting for premium just the interview. So there won't be an intro or anything. It'll just dive right into the interview of some of these that I have in folders. Let me know if that would be something that you like, premium members. Tell me on Instagram. It's the best way to get a hold of me, MindLoveMelissa. And if you're thinking about joining, go to mindlove.com/premium. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.